Alright guys, welcome to another video, and in this video I want to show you how to set up a very basic HTML and CSS document. The importance of this video is to show you how HTML and CSS works. At times it's always a great idea to know, okay, how are things really set up with HTML and CSS. So that's what this video is about. To set up an HTML document, like an ordinary HTML document and a CSS document, the first thing you need to do is the same thing we've always done. You go to create a folder on your desktop. So you can go on your desktop and say new folder, test black, whatever it is. Now that folder has been created, but the folder is empty. But this is the folder we're going to be working with. So now let's go to VS Code, and then we're going to call that folder up. So we say open folder, you go to desktop, and then scroll down to test black, and you open it, and then you say select folder. Straight away, when you do that, it's going to open that folder there. Now, setting up an HTML document is as simple as just right clicking over here and then say new file and call it the index.html. HTML. That's simple, right? So how do you start an HTML document? You press shift on your button and then press 1, and then you bring out the exclamation mark. When you bring out the exclamation mark, you'll see Emmet abbreviation. If you're using VS Code, Emmet abbreviation is automatically installed. So once you select it, you already have your HTML document set up. Now, your HTML document consists of a couple of items that you must have. It should have a doc type. The doc type is HTML. The HTML language is English. The header, it has a body, and then all of that encases an HTML document. If you mistakenly remove this, like, everything is not going to work. So you can't even save it because it's not encased in an HTML document. So it must have an opening tag of HTML, this one here, right? And then it must have a closing tag of HTML. The body must have an opening tag of body and then have a closing tag of body. The header must have a opening tag and a closing tag of head, right? So all of that is very important. If you start with an opening tag, you have to end with a closing tag. Usually the closing tag is a / in front of whatever the tag is. I have some customizations on my system that you probably wouldn't have, but if we ever need to get there, I'll show you that. So in the header component is where you have the document type. So this place, let's just call it test black. So this is going to be like the header of the program. Now, if you right click on your VS Code, there's this extension here called Open Live Server. Open Live Server. Or let's just say live server. So, okay, I'm not online, so sorry, but there's an extension called live server. If you were online, you would just have seen it, so you delete that. And then I already have it on my system, so that's why I have, you can see live server here, it's already installed. So you have to install it if you don't have it, so that if you right click on here, you can just say open with live server. Why I want us to do that is because I want you to be able to see the changes you're making to this thing as soon as we make it. So you can see the top of this place already says test black. So that's what the header is for. So the header component controls that. So let's say if I delete this now and I leave it at test. If we go back to our live server, you see that it's now test. So come back here, and then let's just leave it back at test black. I'm gonna make the first letter A, all caps, so keep that. Now there's one more thing you have to do in the header, and that's where you link up your style.css. So if you press enter, make sure your style.css is in the header, not in the body. The body has to do with the content of your program or your web, but the header is where you link the style.css. So you start linking your style.css by saying link, and then you press enter, and then it's asking you for style sheet. So you see link relative path is style sheet, then the link itself is styles.css. But I know what you're thinking. You're asking, well, where is style.css? Well, that's where we now come back and then say new file, styles.css. So you save that. Notice the styles.css has an hash as the icon, and then index.html has that. So if you set up your styles.css and it doesn't have this hash icon, you've done something wrong. So basically, we now have a styles.css link to our HTML document. How do we know that is true? Well, let's start from maybe an H1. An H1 is a heading 1. It's like the biggest header. So you press H1. So you press enter. In H1, I want us to write hello world. Right? So if you come back to our page now, you should find hello world. What did I write? It's hello world. Right. So let me refresh this tab. So now you have hello world as the header. Now, the basic HTML will not do any styling for you. So you're just going to see it. So if you keep, let's say you duplicate this now, and then you have so many of them. If you go back to your live server, you're just going to find, a lot of hello worlds going among itself like that. Even if you do a line break, what you're just basically going to have is a bunch of hello world, and it's not really going to do anything fancy, right? It's just going to put any space in between. Let's say you put another line break here. You're not going to get much thing done. You're just going to be breaking the line, right? So let's even say you create a div and you remove this and then case it into another div. These things don't control your web page in any specific way, right? It doesn't do you any favor. Even if you break this in now and then you do a div, come over here and then you come here and then maybe you case this in there, right? All you're just basically doing is creating new lines and all of that. It doesn't change anything. So what does something with the styling? That's what we're about to get into, right? So it is CSS that controls the styling. So now let's go to displays and then say, well, H1. So we have selected the H1. So this property says everything that has H1, right? Everything that has H1 in it. There's a problem here. Great. So now if we go to styles.css, now we've selected all the H1s. We want to assign an attribute to the H1. So we can assign first an attribute of color to the H1, and we could say color red, and then you close it like that. So now if you go back here, all the H1s become red. We can assign another attribute to that and say border. Let's say 2 pixels, solid black, right? And then if you go back now, you now have borders. Now we can also assign an attribute of border color to that. So we can say border color, right? And say maybe we pick chocolate, right? That. And then we can assign an attribute of background color to that, and then say chartreuse. So if we go back there now, you'll see that, right? So what I'm trying to tell you is that CSS is what controls the styling. Let me see if we can do border width, right? So let's say 5 pixels like that, and then let's see, so that's the border width. So you can see like the border width. So you see that the styling is controlled by the CSS. So don't forget, when you want to set up your HTML, you have to link this to your styles of CSS. So that way you can have a separate kind of, you can have your CSS in a separate document, and then everything you write here, you can just select them from here and then work with them in your styles of CSS. By the way, that's not the only way you can do styles. Like you can style. There's another way to style other than using a separate CSS document. So I'm going to teach you one other type, and it's called an inline styling. So to style inline, what you do is it's a lot like Tailwind CSS, but what you do is basically you open this place up and then you say style, and then when you enter, you can then say color, right? And so you can say the color is blue, right? So now watch what happens to this H1 that I styled separately. So if we go in there, you see that that one alone has the color blue. If I go back into styles now and I also pick background color, right? So you see that the color has been selected. We could even try a different color, maybe like blue or something. Great. So if we come back here, that section over there has become blue. Another thing we could do is change this to white, since that one has already become that way. So you see that. So one thing you have to put in mind is that you can actually style your document differently from if you have a separate style of CSS. But what we recommend is that you should have a separate styles of CSS file, so that you can then select these items and then find new interesting ways to group them. It's not like you can't style this way, but imagine if you have like 1,000 lines of code and you have to do an inline styling for each of these elements. It's not usually very beneficial that way, because now you have to style H1 separately, and then you have to copy all of these values and then style it this way and all of that, and then begin to change some values and like that. This may appear convenient in the short run, but on the long run it begins to become really cumbersome and then begins to make your life extremely difficult. So that's why we have a separate styling. There's a third one that I'm not going to cover here because it doesn't fall within the framework, but it's called an internal CSS. So in the internal CSS, you then style your documents just like a separate style of CSS, but it will not be inline, to just be above like that. But so this is pretty much how to do it. So if you want to set up an HTML document, that's how you go into it. So I hope this has helped you. If it has, I want you to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, turn on the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye. Take care.